This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 512, Member Platform. On today's show, we're talking about the Member Platform, why it was created, and how you can get involved with our guest, JD Leonard. We'll also cover Profile as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guest today is JD Leonard. JD is a freelance Drupal architect and developer in Austin, Texas, with over 19 years of Drupal experience. He focuses on the development and implementation of complex web applications using Drupal and enjoys organizing local meetups and regional conferences. JD, thanks for joining us for the last 4 weeks and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm John Picozzi, Solutions Architect at EPAM, and today my co-host is Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development.
Happy to be here.
All right, now let's turn it over to Martin Anderson Klutz, a principal solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules and recipes of his own, to talk about our module of the week. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, John. Have you ever wanted to store user information in one or more configurable profiles independent of the user entity itself? There's a module for that. It's called Profile, and it was created as a project in October of 2015 by Boyanzi, but seems to originate in code that was in the 4.0 branch of Drupal core. Recent releases are by Jonathan Saksic of Centauro, and it has an 8.x-1.12 version available, which supports Drupal 9, 10, and 11. It is actively maintained and has both security and test coverage, and has 125 issues, 53 of which are bugs, which is actually pretty good considering the site is officially in use by almost 35,000 sites according to Drupal.org. Now, profiles are conceptually separate from the user account, and users will even edit their profile in a separate tab, which is a pretty common pattern on the web these days. A site can have multiple profile types and then use permissions and roles to determine who can create which kind of profile. Profile forms can optionally be shown during registration, and profile fields can also be set as private, meaning that the value will only be visible to the user and site administrators. By default, profiles will be displayed on the user's view page, and this can be configured in the Manage Display tab on accounts. Profiles are also optionally revisionable, and the project page notes that profiles are not currently translatable, but there is an issue with a patch, so you can try that if it's a requirement for your project. So let's talk about profile.
I remember this module. I don't think I use it on very many projects, but is it a requirement for commerce for like all
I
the
believe it. I
different?
believe it is because that's kind of where I was like, I see most of the guys that have worked on it have worked pretty heavily on commerce, and
Yeah.
I also was like, I've used this before, and I don't remember why. And now that you say that, yeah, I think it is a requirement of commerce, but it's really an interesting idea because, like, you could have, as it states here, you could have different profiles. I liken it to, like, kind of like your Google account where you have different Google. Well, I guess those are actual accounts, but like you could have different profiles. Maybe more like Netflix then, I guess, where you have one account but different people watching and stuff like that. So definitely would be interesting, like, I guess, for, like, if you were gonna use it with a subscription service of some sort where you might have, like, a family subscription and wanna set up different profiles for people.
Yeah.
And, it does highlight a couple of interesting differences to using the user profile. Because originally when you brought this up, Martin, I was kinda like, "Well, why not just use the fields on the user profile?" But, like, the change in permissions, the fields being viewable by the profile owner and the administrator only are interesting. So, definitely a lot of cool features here.
Yeah, I think there's probably a fair bit of it you could do, as you say, with just sort of fields and maybe like field permissions and things. But I think there are definitely use cases where this is probably the right tool for the job in terms of really sort of having those different profile types and really, managing that in I think a more elegant way.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the piece that it works with too isn't it like the shipping and billing profiles? Or maybe that's how it used to be used. like you might be ordering something but want it shipped or billed somewhere differently, and this is how you can tie that all to one user. Yeah, I don't recall. I just remember that when you need it, it's one of those things where you think the user solves the issue until you try to do it, and then you're happy that this exists because it solves that use case. But I never remember what that use case is. It's
I
good
think
to remember.
the history of this module is kind of interesting because the profile namespace was part of Drupal core, right? And then profile 2 came about, right? I think in the Drupal 7 timeframe, maybe before that. And now the evolution of that is now back in the profile namespace.
Yeah, if you look back at the release history, it shows the first one as being that 4.0.x, and it shows the releases being created by Dries. So that shows you how far back that was then.
Hmm,
It's
Real
interesting.
interesting.
I recently took, this is not quite modular of the week material, but I recently took a deep dive back into the history of core, like how core releases happened and when, because I was trying to define, this is something that's harder than you might think. How do you define when a version started and when it ends? Because at first you would say like, oh, Drupal 11 started when Drupal 11.0 came out, or maybe 11 alpha, 11.0 alpha, right? But the truth is the code that started in that alpha release happened before the release, right? So it's just that's when they decided that it was ready to be a release. I did not want to look through commits and find the first commit that was Drupal 11 only, so I took it as the earliest first release for something, and then the currently supported release of something or last supported release. But yeah, I did a little mini project a couple weeks ago where I wanted to see, based on commit history, who contributed to each version of core. So I went all the way back through 4.3.2 because there are no releases before that. So it's like, so I put it into a bucket by itself, like pre 4.3.2 and then 4.3.3 to 4.7 point whatever was the last one. And then every version after that, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 through 11. And I put together the statistics on who contributed what to each branch. It's kind of fun. But yeah, looking at that history is it's fun, but it's messy when it gets older.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what does that have to do with profiles?
Not much other than the fact that Martin mentioned that, there was a 4.0 release done by Therese. It reminded
Got it.
me. Yep.
Sorry, I thought you were gonna tie that into, like, hey, you could make profiles for your releases in some, like,
No.
connector there. Okay,
No, nothing other than sharing the experience of digging through the code history of certain things that get released on Drupal.org.
gotcha. Okay, well, bringing it back to profiles, I think this is, as always, a very topical module for our topic today. Martin, thank you for bringing it to us. Thank you for the discussion. If folks wanted to suggest a module of the week or just chit chat with you, how could they go about doing that?
We are always happy to talk about candidates for Module of the Week or chit chat in general in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can reach out to me directly as ManClue on all of the Drupal and social platforms.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Martin.
See you next week.
Thanks, week.
The New England Drupal Camp is coming November 14th and 15th at Rhode Island College in Providence, Rhode Island. This 2-day camp has, on the first day, a higher ed summit complete with keynote, trainings, contribution day, and a community social. Day 2 offers sessions, a keynote, the Drupal Coffee Exchange, and an after party. Session submissions are now open. Hopefully, you'll join us in November in New England. Find out more at nedcamp.org. The Longhorn PHP Conference is happening October 23rd and 25th in Austin, Texas. Drupal event organizers across Texas are planning tracks of Drupal content and want you to submit a talk. Call for proposals is through July 18th and is likely to be extended. The speaker package includes airfare, hotel, and ticket, which is a nice perk for those folks that are interested in submitting a session. Find out more, including the sponsorship prospectus, at longhornphp.com. All right, JD, we're talking about the member platform. But before we jump into all the nitty gritty details, I'm just wondering if you can kind of give us the elevator pitch, the high level overview of what the member platform is.
Sure. So Member Platform was started as a community initiative, Drupal community initiative, and its mission is to leverage Drupal to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of membership organizations globally, especially those with low technical or financial resources, so they can positively impact their communities. And also to build an open and welcoming community of individuals united in their passion for serving membership organizations through Drupal.
Interesting. So, Drupal Community Initiative is, just to define that, right, is an initiative that the Drupal community comes together to support and move forward, as opposed to like we hear about other Drupal initiatives that are more closely knit to the actual Drupal core project and adding a feature or adding a functionality to that, right?
Yeah, so there are core initiatives or strategic initiatives, right, which are more centrally organized and managed. And then a community initiative, which I learned as I started to investigate this stuff, anybody can propose one. There's no process for it, right? Like just say something is a community initiative and guess what? It is. So here we are.
All right. So
So
it's a little loosey goosey, but it allows for people to come together on a collective topic and push something forward.
Exactly, and so I think it's different than just somebody creating a module,
Right.
right?
yeah.
It's you have a larger overarching goal, you're trying to get a lot of people together to work towards that goal. It's more open-ended.
Yeah.
So before we move on, continuing our tangent on module of the week, one thing that kind of interested me here is the member is it's a nice namespace. How did you get it? Because it looks like this was originally started 18 years ago by Peter Willandon.
It was a long time
Did you
ago.
yeah,
So, yeah,
how did you just talk to him, or did you do a project request, or how
no,
did you
I
end up
did talk to Peter. I knew him from Drupal Camp, New Jersey when I lived out there.
Mhm.
And I did a bunch of research, in trying to figure out, hey, what should we call this thing? And part of that decision was related to this namespace existing and Peter very gracefully being willing to hand that over so that we could pursue this under the member namespace.
It's
Very cool.
interesting to me because you just said that part of this initiative is to leverage Drupal to increase the efficiency and effectiveness for membership organizations. And I think that there's a great synergy there between the Drupal project and what features Drupal offers and membership organizations, whether they be for profit or probably more so not for profit organizations. It surprises me that, something like this hasn't been started before and has it doesn't kind of already exist. So definitely, good work on getting this moving in a direction that, someday we'll have this feature and functionality. I mean, I think it's a great use case for Drupal and will definitely help a lot of not-for-profit member orgs, I think.
So why did you decide to start this initiative?
So the origin story for me was with my neighborhood association. So I moved to Austin 3.5 years ago, and I wanted to get plugged into the local neighborhood. I joined as a member, and I want to clarify: a neighborhood association is not like a homeowners association that gets a bad rep for like caring about the size of your grass and the height of your fence and stuff like that. So my local neighborhood association is just a volunteer nonprofit of people working to sort of advocate on behalf of residents in the neighborhood. So I got involved. They sent out an email like, "Hey, we really need a treasurer." And by the fourth time they sent that email out, I'm like, "Okay, I could do that." So I joined up as the treasurer. And I think one of the challenges, right, that they were facing is the membership lists were in disarray. The former treasurer was processing dues payments mostly in person, and our neighborhood now has over 10,000 residents in it. So you can imagine like it doesn't scale very well. And also by PayPal. The PayPal was like a very old implementation and like it was missing information. There was a lot of manual follow-up needed. It was kind of a mess.
Wow.
We were also, having trouble maintaining a list of like an email list to send communications out to our members. we didn't actually have a good list that we could rely on and reach our members. So that was kind of my first, you know, I guess, introduction into the world of a neighborhood association. So now I find myself as the president because nobody else wants to do the job. And the next obvious thing that we needed to do was to modernize our 1990s feeling HTML website, right? So obviously Drupal was going to be a good contender for that. But two things. One, Drupal is great if you have somebody who can maintain it, right? But I
Yeah.
cannot count on my neighborhood association having somebody who can maintain a Drupal site whenever I might depart, right? So that's not a good long-term choice for that organization. The other is, okay, so I can go spin up a new website, but there are lots of organizations with similar needs here, right? So how can I solve those needs in a repeatable, reusable way to
Mm.
benefit the common needs of other organizations like clubs, associations, meetup groups, nonprofits, and lots of others.
Interesting. Yeah, so I mean, it's funny when you say neighborhood association, I immediately my brain flashed to like one of those neighborhood watch signs that you see in various hoods where like, JD and a bunch of his neighbors are kind of looking through the blinds at like, okay, what's going on out in the neighborhood? Nothing. Okay, cool. But yeah, it's interesting to me that this all got started with a need, but I mean, I think that's how most things usually get started, right? So I heard a couple of different kind of like features in there, right? An ability to kind of take dues, some sort of payment processing, some sort of membership group kind of assignment, right? And then like a way to manage kind of a mailing list and send different emails to different member groups, right? So this is a very roundabout way of me asking, like, are all of those features kind of planned for the MVP version of the member platform, and what else could we expect to see in an MVP?
So there's a grander vision, right, long term for what member platform provides, but we have to start somewhere small, something that we can actually release and get to a finish line.
Hmm.
So our 1.0 release, we're pitching as like a light version of meetup.com. So one install of member platform 1.0 would serve the needs of one meetup group offering just free memberships. So that would let people become members, manage their member profile, reference the module of the week, and RSVP to events. And it would let organizers manage the members, manage the events and the RSVPs, and send emails to members, all while owning the data. And so Member Platform has a global scope. So we're also seeking to have it be available in at least one non-English language for 1.0. And our 1.0 scope is strategic so that we can meet the needs of Drupal user groups, many of which rely on meetup.com today,
Mm.
but are increasingly annoyed by its price increases, paywalls, limited customizability, and crucially, the vendor lock in through the lack of access to members' contact information unless you pay for their ultra premium pro version. And even that only lets you get email addresses going forward, not
Hmm.
your existing list of members.
Also, you fail to mention the spammability of your group being being spammed by random people trying to sell their MacBook Pros.
Another joy of meetup.com.
Yes.
So
Okay.
I I I'm not sure that this is really the best place to ask, but as we're going through these first two kind of lists of goals, I hear a, some amount of overlap with event platform. Can you talk about what differentiates you from event platform? Are there plans to integrate a lot of the recipes from event platform? Like, how is this project or initiative going to platform?
Great question. So there's I think a Venn diagram, right, of requirements, and event platform is seeking to meet the needs of a Drupal camp or a similar kind of small conference event, whereas member platform is really seeking to serve a larger set of needs over the lifetime of an organization,
Hmm.
including smaller, less frequent events like maybe a meetup, as well as a lot of the communication needs and other things sort of beyond the event space.
So
Um,
there's an instance where one organization might use both of these, right? Where one is the member platform is going to manage their members and kind of like reoccurring monthly meetups, right? And then the event side is going to handle like maybe an annual conference for the event or some sort of other larger event. Or maybe I mean maybe the meetup functionality gets passed off to the event platform, but they kind of like that's where the line is drawn as I understand it. Does that sound correct, JD?
Yeah, absolutely. And so Martin Anderson Klitz, who we're all familiar with here, has been leading the charge on event platform. And he is also, we're in close communication with him about how do we integrate event platform and member platform?
Mm.
Like how does that work? How does an organization use both? And I think there's a larger interesting question around any functionality related to events and event registration. In Drupal today, you kind of need a user to be the one who is registering for an event, whereas in member platform, we are building on top of contacts who are not necessarily Drupal users, but we need a way for them to RSVP to events or be RSVP'd. And so I wonder if there is an opportunity for sort of an upstream API or some sort of layer that would allow some of the functionality that Event Platform has and some of the functionality that other event registration tools have in Drupal to be able to be used not just by users, but by other sort of attendee entities in the system.
Hmm.
I mean, I love the MVP idea of like a meetup light for Drupal, meetups, right? Every time I do log into Meetup, every time I log into Meetup to do something, I'm kind of like, okay, I guess, yes, I'll do this. But I mean, I think that's a good set of goals there to be able to kind of replace some of that functionality because Meetup's not free, right? So like, there's a potential here where you could reduce the cost for a Meetup quite a bit by, you know, having them use this instead of the Meetup platform itself.
I I do want to clarify though. I think one thing in I, again, I feel like I'm straying from the show notes a bit, but this is the piece that I think is most interesting to me is if we're trying to be a meetup light, if member platform is trying to be a meetup light, there are a couple of features of meetup that I'm not hearing, which is a centralized login and a way to share separate organization events. Because yeah, the spamming part of it is, or like the promotional part of it is kind of annoying. But if I'm if there are four organizations in my area using member platform, it would be nice to have a single login or a single dashboard to be able to see them all. Now,
So
as I'm saying this, I know how far out of scope this is for MVP. But are you looking for these types of tie-ins as well when we're building this, or is this really just like one organization, one instance, period?
Nick, this is something I hear again and again, and I think it's because so many people are so used to meetup.com and they're reliant on its feature set. And
mm,
you're right. You have not heard anything about, we're hosting multiple meetup groups and there's discoverability and a common login and stuff like that, right? Like that is a whole nother level of scope. And I would be thrilled if somebody ran with that, right? And leveraged member platform and found a way to do that. But I also think there are challenges because you need the network effect. You need a critical mass of people to be using a
Yeah,
site to sort of benefit from that discoverability. And so meetup.com has that, and that's why it's so entrenched. It's why it's so hard for organizers to pull away from it, right? That
yeah,
and there just being very limited other options for them.
yeah,
I mean, I
So
think to that point, Nick, like I feel like the Drupal Association and D.O fills that gap, right? Because I envision like and not probably not, as JD said, not an MVP, right? But like I see a world where, and I know as part of the event organizers working group, like this is the ideal situation or scenario, right? You know, member platforms out there, Drupal user groups are using it, right? They all have their own sites with their own, signups and lists, right? But people are going to Drupal.org and looking for those meetup events there. And that's the central place where they're saying, like, yep, click. That's the button that I want to choose. The other aspect too is if member platforms out there in the wild, right? that could actually be installed on Drupal.org as a set of tools for event organizers to use directly on Drupal.org, right?
I,
Before you jump in there, one other aspect here too is that the switch of Drupal.org switching to a SSO provider, I now think allows for these other sites to be able to use that as a central login. I don't know that they're fully ready to allow for that yet, but I do think it's coming. So, I do see this as providing a lot of value to the Drupal community and being one of those things that we can kind of like build upon.
I think you're thinking too small for the goals of what member platform is, though, because Drupal user groups aren't the only use case, right? If there's a local Lego user group that wants to have a membership platform, their SSO is not going to be with the Drupal Association, and their events are not going to be part of the Drupal Association. If the Drupal Association ever provides that service, it's
Well,
not going to
right,
be
but
part
they
of
they
that.
would have their own Drupal site hosting that and whatever their own funnels are to get people to find their events,
Well,
right?
well, that's my point. Like my question was, if there's a local Lego user group and a local Drupal user group both using member platform, is there a way for those two groups to cross pollinate on their individual installs?
So we had a
Can they write it?
discussion in one of our member platform meetings about federating events, right, across groups. And there's, I don't know if Activity Pub is the right protocol or something like that, but there are different
Right.
ways.
Yep.
That might be completely off. There are different ways, right, that you could do that. I'm a little skeptical, frankly, of that, like from the outset, just because I think it's almost like a little too esoteric and nerdy for most
It's
organizations
definitely
to
not
grasp.
MVP. It's definitely
I
not
mean,
MVP by
But
any
it's
metric.
possible. Like, it's absolutely
Yep.
possible, and I think that would be so cool.
in true Drupal community form. I think we're going way down the rabbit hole here before we get to like an MVP that is workable, right? I mean, personally, I don't know that that's a problem that I would try to solve if I were JD for the member platform, right? Because you can still use a free meetup account to get word of mouth out there as to like,
Yeah.
yes, we have this meetup, like come to it, right? And I think that's a great place to do that, right? And then point them to your website to sign up for your list and notifications and whatever.
Well, and it's healthy for an organization, whatever platform they might be using, right, to collect that contact information off of meetup.com
Yeah,
so that they own the
absolutely.
data, they're not dependent on that vendor.
I mean, as
Yeah.
somebody who's worked with quite a few nonprofits that are membership based, right? The data and connecting to those potential donors is huge, right? And that's why there are a lot of donor management systems out there that provide these pieces of functionality. I think from an MVP version, right? Just to have that set of features, have people be able to use, install Drupal, use it for their website content, use it for their email marketing lists, even if they integrate it with Mailchimp or some other mail service, right? They have those options, right? But having that data and having access to it and not having to pay the annual fees for a service like Meetup are, I mean, I think they're compelling, definitely.
So,
Yep.
John, let me go back to your point about SSO and the Drupal community, right?
Mhm.
So, yes, we now have, and Drupal.org uses Keycloak single sign-on, right, managed by the Drupal Association, and it has the potential for external sites to be able to authenticate against Drupal.org profiles. There are open Drupal.org issues. I'm sure we can include those in the show notes that are sort of stalled right now on sort of policy decisions and like how do people get access to do that, and then actual implementation of setting it up. But that would be so powerful. And we have an open issue in the member platform queue, about having that kind of integration. I also opened one in the event platform queue because that would be powerful for Drupal camps as well. There's also an API on Drupal.org where we could pull event information down from the Drupal community events section of the site and automatically populate that event information on a member platform site for a given meetup group, right? Which would solve a pain that I've experienced as a Drupal user group organizer of having to put the same information in more than one place, right? Copy,
Yeah.
paste, changing the formatting, all of that. So I'm excited for the potential there. There are a few steps before we can kind of put all the pieces together.
So we've talked about MVP. We've talked in depth about a couple of post MVP possible features, but what else is planned for post MVP?
So post MVP, there's a lot that we could do, right? So supporting many types of memberships, different durations, multiple person memberships, which are common for some organizations, memberships for organizations themselves. So think about like chambers of commerce and also households. The My local YMCA, for example, has a family membership, right? And there's a lot of complexity in keeping track of those bits and pieces because I think, for example, it's for 1 to 2 adults plus one or more children, right? So like that's some pretty specific logic, right? And having the ability for member platform to support, those sorts of cases, I think really makes it useful for the widest base of organizations. Also, the ability to actually accept payments for dues. Likely that could involve Drupal commerce, but equally, there could be simpler implementations that kind of don't have the heft and weight of Drupal commerce behind that.
I will say Stripe and web forms is a pretty simple setup, at least the last time I did it. So
Simple for technical people, maybe not so simple for people. Yeah, it's simple for technical people. You'll definitely want to spend some time figuring because like for Stripe and web form requires you to edit the handler on the web form that's accepting the Stripe payments, right? So you
well, the last time I did it, which was a couple of years ago, there was a module that actually just allowed you to put like your Stripe API key in there, and it kind of did all the other bits for you. But
maybe it's been smoothed out since then. But
maybe I need
yeah,
to do another demo of it and see if it still works that way. But
So I realize I should go back because I failed to mention sort of a key part of member platform, and that's our overall vision post MVP. So
what's that?
there are two parts to this vision, right? The first is to provide a Drupal native ecosystem of secure, privacy enhancing, integrated, beautiful, and user friendly tools that can initially meet many of the operational needs of at least 80% of membership organizations globally. This is a mouthful that have 0 to 5 staff members, including all volunteer
Okay,
organizations.
so less of a mouthful. You're trying to solve most use cases for small membership.
Exactly.
Small organizations that have memberships. So there might be a large membership, but they might have only 4 or 5 employees.
Yeah. So we're optimizing for the low end of the market. So groups and organizations without significant resources. And we want to do this wherever they are in the world.
Okay.
The
You said there
second
were 2
piece,
parts.
yeah, the second piece of the vision, another little bit of a mouthful, is to facilitate the existence of, but not implement, affordable turnkey software as a service solutions to empower membership organizations to more immediately and sustainably benefit the communities they serve. And this one always confuses people,
Mm.
but it's important.
No, it makes sense to me. So let me see if I understand. So you're saying that if somebody so you build this service, I could come in and be like, "You know what? I need this membership service for" the first piece might be, "I need this membership service for my bowling league," right? But somebody else could come along and say, "You know what? I wanna make this better for bowling league membership companies." And so they might make a software as a service solution that leverages the membership platform for bowling leagues across the country that they then pay that company, and they're running a membership platform as a service. Is that
Yes,
right?
absolutely, but I think there's more to it than that, right? Like I
Okay.
think the real goal is to be able to reach as many organizations as possible and benefit them. And because we're targeting organizations that don't have a lot of money and don't necessarily have a technical person involved, right? They need a service where they can just hand over a credit card and be able to get all these great benefits. And all the better if it is targeting their specific niche, like a bowling league or something like that. Like that's fantastic. But if there's nowhere that provides member platform as a service, right, then our target audience is never actually going to use member platform.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'm going to see it is a struggle still is going to be like the whole and this is something that we've known since Drupal CMS and like all like it's been a problem since 777, which is how do you get this to run on shared hosting that so that they can pay 15 bucks a month and just have it working and have it update. But if you have a SaaS like provider in between, that solves that issue because then yeah, they put in a credit card, pay 20, 25 bucks a month and have their system set up and then the upstream people are the ones that have to worry about, you know,
Feels
hosting and
feels like a
deployments and all
great
that.
use case of Drupal Forge.
Could be.
Yep, yep.
Could be the
Could be great with Drupal Forge, Drupito, or other services TBD. But I want to be very clear, like this is part of the vision for the initiative is to support this, right? It's not to actually create a SaaS solution, but it's to create a project that could be turned into a SaaS solution, and we hope
Right.
will be.
Interesting. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's a great goal. I think that's super useful. So I do notice that the project page mentions contribution to the CRM project within Drupal. CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management System. A lot of nonprofit orgs, membership orgs have those. That's, kind of like the donor management system or the member management system, right? I'm wondering if you could tell us what that looks like and more so kind of talk about the differences between member platform and the CRM project work that's happening.
Sure. So as we defined the vision for the project, it became clear that it would be advantageous to build member platform on top of a Drupal native CRM. So that led to an evaluation of Drupal native CRM options. And so the ones that are most well known and easiest to find are CRM Core, Red Hen, and then there's a newer one called Contacts as well. But then there was sort of the last one that I found, which is just under the CRM namespace, not to be confused with CRM Core. And ultimately, its architecture and that it was in an early stage of its life cycle, right? It didn't have any releases yet. Ironically, made it kind of attractive because it meant we could ensure that it would meet a wide variety of use cases because we're seeking to sort of help a wide variety of use cases. And so that's why we ultimately decided to adopt CRM.
I'm
So
I'm not suggesting that you change tack here, but did you look at ERPL? Drupal ERPL?
Purple.
ERPAL?
Oh, ERP as in enterprise resource planning?
I assume so. Like they kind of have
yeah,
a
that's a different
CRM baked in,
that's a
but they also
different
have
different system, right? An ERP system
well,
is different from a CRM
yeah, they
sort.
so it's an ERP, but they have like a baked in CRM
Huh.
aspect to it. So like I
Ah,
said, I don't think that this would be a use case for it, but I did install that a long time ago.
So I'm gonna put on my I don't know my naysayer hat, my grumpy IT guy hat for a second, and say like, well, a Drupal based CRM, great, fine. A member platform built on top of a Drupal based CRM, great, fine. But so many organizations already have a CRM, and one of the great powers of Drupal is bringing data in from other systems to, allow for a unification layer, right? So if I want to use member platform on my website, but I have some sort of third party CRM solution, like, have you guys thought about plugins, developing an abstraction layer like so many other kind of initiatives do in Drupal where, you can plug and play whatever, CRM backend you want into Drupal and use that?
yeah. So big, big ask in many ways, right? And in the Drupal sphere, right, you've got lots of CRM integration modules out there.
Mm,
Salesforce being one of the most popular.
sure.
I can't not mention Civi CRM,
Mhm.
right? Which is itself another open source CRM that's very popular in the Drupal community because it integrates with Drupal. And there are a ton more out there. And I think the CRM project is well positioned to basically allow for synchronization of data,
Mm,
right, between external systems. And so I could definitely see, using an integration module to connect Drupal's CRM with an external system, whether it is itself another CRM or just something like Mailchimp, right? Or
Mm.
ticketing system or anything, right? Anything really. And I think CRM really, the whole point of it is it revolves around a contact entity type with bundles for person, household, and organization. And then you've got relationships among these different contacts. And that's well suited to a lot of different use cases. And so it's ripe for integration.
I see. So you're basically saying, hey, we're building on top of CRM because CRM is that normalization layer between like my external CRM into Drupal and then into the member platform.
And I also think more so, if we think about what we're trying to do with member platform, the obvious choice, perhaps the simpler choice would be to just go build it, right? It takes more work to adopt an upstream CRM, right? Which is going
Mm.
to host a huge portion of the functionality, right? Than it does to just go build it. But I think one of the defining features of member platform that I kind of mentioned earlier is it's not user centric, right? It's contact centric. So it's about organizing
Yeah.
membership information for the organizers of the group. And that doesn't mean that there won't be users involved and that users can't log in and manage their information, right? But it does mean there's this layer of abstraction. And effectively, it means member platform is a CRM.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that you're thinking about that is important because there are plenty of Drupal initiatives, Drupal projects that just go out and say, "Yeah, we can build it," and they just build it, and there's no integration. There's no I they don't necessarily think of the real world use case, right? And like, yes, a small member organization may not have a CRM. This may be like, hey, we're going to use Drupal and build it from the ground up. But if you want to appeal to the middle or maybe even larger nonprofit member organizations, they definitely do have a CRM. And one of Drupal's great superpowers is integration with and bringing together data from different systems, right?
Uh,
So taking having that be a point that you're thinking about is, I think, super important.
Tell me if I'm wrong, JD, by the way. I think that the medium to large size organizations will be a good fit for member platform, but I I'm hearing JD say that those would be targeted by some sort of SaaS service building on top of member platform. So member platform themselves isn't going to worry about those integrations, at least in the short term. In the long term, if somebody needs a Salesforce integration, somebody providing a service, because the truth is, no small organization is using Salesforce as a CRM. Most of those small organizations don't even know what a CRM is. They're probably just using Mailchimp to manage or Meetup to manage all their stuff. So building those integrations do make it more powerful and flexible. But for the larger end of the market, and those larger ends of the market already have budget to hire people to build custom solutions for them. And so member platform can be a piece of that puzzle once it comes out, but it's not going to be one of the targets. Is that, am I hearing you correct?
So I would say that member platform is optimizing, right, for the low end of the market, but the mid and larger, end of the market, those organizations, I think are going to find member platform really appealing. In particular, because what are their open source options out there, right? If they're looking for an open source solution and the benefits of open source, and they're looking at a CRM or something that has this sort of functionality, their best option right now is Civi CRM,
Yeah.
right? And Civi CRM is fantastic. It's also complicated. It's a similar level of complicated as Drupal in many ways, right?
Yeah.
But Civi CRM does a lot of things really well in the CRM space.
Mhm.
Drupal does a whole lot of other things really well. And
Mhm.
it's sort of time to move some of that CRM functionality, into Drupal and integrate it well with the rest of the great stuff that Drupal does around content management and, there's a lot that can be done.
Yeah. I mean, I think Nick, you're right. to an extent, but I think one of the things that especially larger nonprofit orgs are always looking at is how to reduce cost, right? So if they can reduce cost of, hey, we're already using Drupal, or hey, we need to re-platform our website and we want better integration into our CRM, moving into member platform where it's using the CRM to pull in their data and then allowing, members to update that information, or purchase their
Yeah.
membership add-ons, or purchase event tickets, or do all of that stuff through their web platform, right? I mean, I think that's a super powerful use case, and even if it's not an MVP use case, right? I think that one of the things that a lot of nonprofits are looking at is like, oh, we can reduce cost, we can make things more better integrated without having to kind of re-platform our whole CRM. So,
And
yeah.
also, I would add there's huge value in being able to deplatform off of other subscription services, right,
Absolutely.
into a lower cost open source solution that is very customizable and that you can integrate with whatever you need it to.
Right. Absolutely.
But before we move on, I'd also want to just give a shout out to the maintainer of CRM, Stephen Ayers, Blue Geek 9 on Drupal.org. He does a fantastic job leading the charge there, and I definitely encourage people to take a look.
Awesome. So I'm getting pretty excited about this project, hearing about it. So if I wanted to test it out, try it out, where is the code for member platform?
So the most disappointing thing I think people are going to hear on this call is that there isn't any, not in member platform itself. So thus far, all of our contributions of code have been to the CRM project, which is where actually
Okay.
a lot of the functionality that we're seeking to provide is going to live. And the reason
Okay.
I think for that is we are seeking to make a lot of the functionality available not just to member platform, right, but to any other install that wants to take advantage of CRM, right? It's like there's a lot of stuff that could benefit any system that is dealing with contacts, right? We talk about event registration, which is going to be a key part of member platform. Well, that's valuable outside of the context of member platform, right? Having something that is contact focused. So that's kind of the pattern there.
Okay.
So just to drive it home, make it crystal clear. Like, member platform right now, there is no member platform module that you can install. There is no, and I don't mean this to be demeaning, right? But like, there is no member platform code per se, right? Right now you guys are in kind of a planning phase, a thinking phase, and then making kind of those incremental updates to and improvements to CRM where it makes sense. Is that clear? Is
Yeah,
that
well,
fair to say?
it is fair to say, although it's not just a planning phase because implementation is happening. It's just happening in the CRM project.
Okay. So code is being produced. It's just happening in CRM. And how, I mean, how is the CRM project progressing, I guess, with its releases?
So CRM is up to Alpha 4 now,
Mm.
and it's being quickly refined. And the code that's in there, right, is stuff that's not specific to member platform, right? It's the more general pieces, but it's the kind of foundational stuff that we were going to have to build in member platform itself if we didn't
Mhm.
adopt a CRM. Yeah.
So sorry, I just lost my question. What was I gonna ask? Oh, okay. So you're building on top of a lot of things. Do you see member platform eventually becoming a site template or a recipe or a distribution? Like, how do you envision once there is code or something to install? How do you envision that looking, or is that still kind of open to interpretation?
So when member platform, when we kind of first started having our meetings and talking about this stuff, that was one of the big questions. Well, it was before site templates were really kind of being talked about, but recipes, right, was the hottest thing. Like, hey, are we making a recipe? And we didn't really know. But now I say absolutely, and the reason for that is because there's a lot there's a lot of stuff that's like being implemented in CRM that's going to be widely applicable, but there's going to be a lot of need to make much more opinionated sort of installs that are specific to the needs of different types of organizations. So, for example, there could be a recipe or a site template for a meetup group, and there might be another one for a neighborhood association, right? And they could all leverage a common core of functionality in member platform, but be customized and sort of simplified and slimmed down for their target audience.
It's interesting because I think of those as like one recipe where like you either turn on or off. Well, I guess they could just be different, like you said, different recipes that kind of load the same base set, right? Because like I can imagine like a meetup setup where I might want to pull in some of that, those association features of like, hey, collecting dues or something like that, right? And I think recipes probably lends itself to that sort of thing. I'd actually be interested to see like if recipes were a first kind of crack at this, like adding that site template layer where it comes with like a really nice customizable theme could be nice as well. So like yeah, this definitely seems to lend itself better to those two implementations as opposed to just kind of like building a module, right? Because I mean it sounds like at the end of the day, your thinking is that like it doesn't necessarily need a module because there's other modules that can come together to provide these same sorts of features.
Yeah, I think a lot of the functionality that might go into a module realistically is going to go into the CRM ecosystem, whether it's in CRM itself
Mm,
or just a module that extends CRM
mhm.
and provide some functionality that member platform will need and hopefully, other projects can take advantage of as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of my biggest things in like thinking of the kind of the boards the nonprofit boards that I sit on and the volunteer work that I do. Like, man, it'd be a lot easier if I could just run a recipe and like, ta-da! Like I have all this stuff working and ready to go. Also, recipe would could provide potentially configuration and content. So you get a lot more bang for your buck there, I think. So
Yeah,
interesting
definitely.
to see. I'm assuming that it would probably be yeah, I just totally lost my train of thought, I think.
Sorry, was that my fault?
Yeah,
Honestly.
yeah, that's
Sorry.
alright. Anyway.
S so, I obviously preparing for the show, one of the things I did was look at the issue queue. The issue queue is fairly well maintained. It's relatively new for member platform, but one thing that I noticed is there's there's a lot of nitty-gritty planning type issues linking to a Google Doc where things are getting outlined. There's a lot of functional specs. There's a lot of, why did you feel it was important to take this approach to planning the initiative? I don't know that I've seen this all that all that often in the Drupal community. Is this something you've taken from somewhere? Why'd you take this approach?
I mean, certainly my background, I used to be a program manager at Microsoft, and like this is just how we did things, right? Plays a piece here. I actually think it has more to do with being a community initiative rather than just like a project. Let's go build something quickly, right? The typical approach in the Drupal community is for a developer to create a contra project and sort of if they build it, they will come. And a key advantage of that approach, right, is you can get something released quickly. But I wanted to make sure that we took into account a wide range of use cases, that we were explicitly inclusive, and that the project didn't revolve around me. So I'm really like my first steps were like, hey, let's get as many people involved, as many voices in the room as possible. And that necessarily slows things down. But I'm happy having done that. I think one of the challenges is, right, is progress is slower.
Yeah.
I mean, I am gonna go out on a limb here, and like this is a very refreshing approach to community initiatives and building Drupal, right? Like I love moving fast and breaking things. I think sometimes like you can talk something to death and it's good to just jump in and build it and see like get to an MVP and like see where you need to make adjustments. But sometimes I think with these things, we just build code to build code because we think we can build code that'll solve the problem better and faster, right? As opposed to taking this approach and like not building the code and talking about it, bringing more people into the fold, and like you've kind of taken an approach here and built an initiative around thinking about the problem and kind of supporting other ecosystems and areas as opposed to just writing code because you think that's the fastest, quickest way forward, right? Again, like super refreshing. When I joined some of JD's boffs in the last DrupalCon was in
Atlanta.
Atlanta. That's it. In Atlanta. And I was like, that's where I first learned that like there was no code, there was no module to install to like start tinkering with. I was like, what? I'm like, this is like the best idea ever. Why didn't we think of this? So I would say that, if you're thinking about starting an initiative or starting a module, maybe you just start with like getting a bunch of people together at a DrupalCon or a Drupal camp and having a bath and talking about it and kind of thinking of ways you can improve what already exists as opposed to, just kind of rolling your own. But
That
to get
said,
yeah, go for it. Go for
right?
it.
That said, right, there is value in shipping, right?
Absolutely.
And we haven't done that yet. We're sort of far from that in many ways. But I will say, I think the choice to adopt CRM was really a blessing for us because
Yeah.
it meant that now we've got someone else and a larger, ecosystem of potentially interested parties contributing to kind of the core
Yeah.
concepts around contact management and relationships and all that stuff that's not specific to our goals
Mhm.
and vision. And so now we can turn our attention a little more towards the stuff that's specific to member platform while also encouraging people who really want to get in there and code to go do that in CRM,
Mhm.
right? And that will, accelerate member platform.
It also and this may be ill received, but it allows you to get off the Drupal island, right? I think like and maybe I made this point earlier, but I'm gonna double down on it. I think a lot of times we're like, we're the Drupal community, we can do it better, and we go in and we start coding things and like we build this thing that is very Drupal centric and doesn't allow us to integrate or bring in data from other places and like we can't live in that world. We can't succeed in that world. Let me put it that way, right? We have to be willing to bring in data from other places. We have to be willing to kind of like as Dree says, get off the Drupal island, right? And I think like this approach kind of lends itself to that, right? You're relying on CRM and CRM will eventually integrate with other CRM platforms and bring data in from there and like it just makes a lot of sense and as you just said allows you to focus on more of the member platform specific features that you feel like you need. But I wonder like you just highlighted the fact that like yes eventually we have to ship code and we're a little bit slow to do that. Like how's the approach working out? Like is the shipping of code the only kind of like or the speed at which you can ship code the only downfall that you've had or are there other areas where you're like man this approach didn't work out as well as we had thought?
So we kick things off in January, and I'd say most activity has been mostly constrained to our meetings.
Mhm.
Now we've had weekly meetings, alternating between Zoom and Slack. One of the reasons for that is to bring people in regardless of their time zone and availability at a specific time. And so it's been great to have some contributors from around the world,
Mhm.
not just in US time zones. And I think, it's hard to motivate employees, but it's harder still to motivate volunteers.
Mhm.
And I think it's easy to get people to attend meetings. They're interested to come because I think this concept really resonates, right, with a lot of people. Everyone has an organization that they're a part of or, they've been a member of. They've encountered the sort of strife that we're trying to solve for. And I think it's just harder to get people to sort of do something concrete in between the meetings, in particular at the point we're in our life cycle, because we're still sort of in some ways up in the clouds in the planning stuff,
Mhm.
right? And I think this is going
Yeah.
to become easier once we're truly implementing what will feel like member platform, just as we're seeing greater interest and contribution to CRM.
Yeah, that makes. I mean, that makes sense. I think it's a lot harder to like give people direction when it's like the hypothetical planning thinking sort of stuff, right? You need to have those meetings and conversations about that in order to be able to get to a consensus.
I will say I'm surprised perhaps how easily we sort of reached consensus on a lot of things.
Mm.
We've had lots of people in our meetings, and everyone just seems to be kind of on board with our direction, which I think is fantastic. And I'm frankly shocked that there hasn't been more conflict.
Be careful what you wish for. That's where I would leave that one. So let's talk a little bit more about that, right? So we're talking about, obviously the meetings are very productive. The lulls between the meetings, maybe not so much. You are working towards kind of getting something implemented, updates to CRM, but like where are the people, like if I'm listening to this podcast and I'm like, oh, member platform sounds cool. Like where does member platform need help?
So for somebody who's ready to code, they want to get in, get their hands dirty, I'll direct them to CRM, right?
Mhm.
That's our chief dependency, and it's got plenty of tasks that need contributors, and that will all directly benefit member platform. For things specific to member platform, we're still in planning and we could use help fleshing out our functional specification, building wireframes, and defining tasks,
Mm.
which then makes it easier for folks to dive in, kind of complete smaller bits of work.
Makes me wish I had more time in my day to, like, jump into another thing, but, yeah, I think my time bucket is empty right now. Functional specifications, building wireframes, so, like, more like maybe UX sorta folks for that sort of
Yep.
thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. UX, folks with good design sense.
Defining
I think,
tasks, project managers, like, you looking for those types of folks?
yep, yep, absolutely. And I
Cool.
think I think once we've kind of got more of a visual, right, of what we're looking to build, it will also help, draw some people in to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've spent the last hour and a half or so talking about member platform. Who else is involved right now? You mentioned there's a bunch of meetings, a lot of people on there. Who are these people?
So we've got a lot of people. We've got 20 people who have actually commented in our issue queue saying that they're going to contribute in different ways. We have maybe 10 people who are regularly attending meetings. And then we've got, I'd say, maybe 3 or 4 people who are, actually contributing to CRM as far as kind of code commits. Yeah, so there, too many people to list, but we also have like I think 115 or so people in our Slack channel, right? Which I
Oh,
think
wow.
proves the level of interest in the project. But I think a lot of people are really just sort of there to see what happens and to
Yeah.
maybe jump in when there's something to play around with.
How many do you have a sense of how many of those people belong to member organizations or would use something like this within a member organization that they're part of?
So we also have a Drupal.org issue that lists organizations that might be interested as being kind of early adopters of member
Mm,
platform. And a lot of these are Drupal user groups because they're sort of really interested. But there's some other interesting ones, like there's a church, there's member platform itself, right? Which could easily dog food member platform and keep track of sort of the members of member platform, the people who want to use member platform, right? The users.
it's like Inception, but okay, keep going.
It is. The Drupal mentoring team
Mm,
currently uses Open Social, but they're interested in seeing what member platform could do for them.
mm.
And then I think there are a lot of people who belong to other organizations. It's come up in meetings, right? And we've solicited use cases and requirements from them to kind of understand what are the broad set of requirements. And one of the things that we're trying to do is be able to devise a roadmap where we say, hey, in this upcoming version, this is going to meet the needs of these specific organizations who have kind of told us
Okay.
what they need.
Smart.
And that
Mhm.
means that we have effectively customers lined up, right, who want to use the product and are invested in its success and in contributing back.
Awesome.
Interesting.
And if somebody else listening to this podcast did want to get involved, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I would send them to memberplatform.org, which just redirects to the project page on Drupal.org. We also have a Drupal Slack channel. That's the best place to get plugged in. Please introduce yourself, member-platform. Finally, there's also a newsletter that you can subscribe to if you just want news about the initiative, say when we've got a release. So lots of ways to plug in.
Fabulous. I mean, all that sounds really awesome. JD, I want to thank you for spending the last 4 weeks with us. I want to thank you for kind of taking the lead on member platform and driving it forward. It sounds really exciting, and wishing you the best of luck with that.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Do you have questions or feedback? You can reach out to Talking Drupal on the socials with the handle Talking Drupal or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on the Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
Yes, you listener, can have me promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/TD promo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron, as well as all the benefits, at talkingdrupal.com and choosing that Become a Patron button in the sidebar. Alrighty. JD, if folks wanted to get a hold of you, talk about hiring you for some work, talk about member platform, talk about anything, JD Leonard, where could they do that?
They can find me as JD Leonard on Drupal.org and Drupal Slack, and they can also go to jdleonard.net.
Awesome. Nick, what about you?
You can find me online pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
And I'm John Picozzi. You can find me at picozzi.com or on the social media or Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And if you want to learn about EPAM, you can go to epam.com.
If you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
Thanks a lot,
See you
everyone.
next week.
Have a good one.